So let me just go over some of the notes that I have taken. He said this has been handed out at the bloody hands of Hamas. He called it sheer evil. He confirmed that at least 14 Americans have been killed in these attacks. He said, we stand with Israel. He also went on to say that Hamas does not stand for the Palestinians, that they stand for the murder of Jews. I think that was a great distinction to make. The President of the United States acknowledging that the Palestinians, in many cases, just like we heard from our friend earlier today, George Weiss, that the Palestinians are used as human shields, that they are used as pawns in the real goal of Hamas. The goal of Hamas is the extinction, is the complete annihilation of the Jewish people, not only in Israel, but I believe around the world, which is why, skipping ahead, he talked about U.S. security forces being tightened, talked about Homeland Security and how local police agencies have strengthened things. He said Israel has a right and a duty to respond. Another important thing from the president. We had heard from some, I guess we don't expect anything less of the people in the squad, in D.C. And I'm not making this about politics, but their ideology, it has been anti-Israel. And the closest thing to denouncing what they saw from Hamas was a call for peace and a ceasefire. And the president making a clear distinction here that this is not about a time. This isn't a time for a ceasefire, that the Israelis have not only the right, but they have a duty to respond. And so we are going to stay back, stay out of the way. We are not calling for a ceasefire at this point. We understand that the Israelis have a duty and a right to respond. And the president said that in his comments. He talked about our military assistance. He said that we will help them replenish the Iron Dome and get them the ammunition they need to make sure that they can always protect themselves. He acknowledged American hostages and how Americans have been kept and taken hostage in that country, and that we are going to work diligently along with our Israeli counterparts and the American government for the release of American hostages. That would be just a little side note from me. What message are being sent through channels around the world to that end? That whether it was how we left Afghanistan or in other areas, there is a message to be sent. And when Jimmy Carter, again, this isn't about politics, but it is about policy. The end of the Carter administration, Americans have been taken hostage for over a year in the nation of Iran. And there is no way that it was a coincidence that Inauguration Day, on the day the presidency changed hands from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan on January 20th of 1980, I would say 81, I'm sorry, that there wasn't a message that had been clearly sent to the Iranians that there was also, with regime change, going to be policy change, and how we handle nations and factions and whatever you want to call these groups that would take Americans hostage, that there is a difference in how it's going to be handled. And you cannot convince me that that regime change and policy change isn't what led to, there is no coincidence that those hostages were released on Inauguration Day. And that was sent, and the president said we're going to deal with our counterparts. But that, to me, the continuation of that policy in my mind is a shift in your mind as Americans, that we are not going to tolerate this, that we are not going to tolerate the annihilation of the Jewish people. We're not going to stand by and watch our friends go through a second Holocaust. We are not going to watch the Jewish people be subjected to this without American intervention. I think that's a great message to send, and it is the world message we should send. But when it comes to innocent Americans that were there, we cannot bring back the dead. But we certainly can avenge anyone that's taken hostage and further harmed once it's acknowledged that they are Americans. And I hope that message is going to be clearly sent. He also warned other nations not to get involved. He said, don't. That was the word he used. That those that would take advantage of this situation, whether it's Hezbollah coming in from Lebanon or it's other organizations that would jump into this fight now, believing it's a time to do this. He compared this to ISIS and the attacks at ISIS, and ISIS was brutal. It was the definition of terrorism, and that's what this is. When we look at, and the closest thing we can come to it is when you see the behavior of street gangs in our country sometimes, but certainly south of our border, when you have evil gangs like MS-13, and there are many of them, but MS-13 is the most well-known, that uses terror tactics against its enemies. It isn't just that we will kill you. We will slaughter you, we will dismember you, we will disembowel you, we will decapitate you, and we will leave you hanging on fire from a bridge to send a message that we are willing to do the most evil things to send this message to you. We'll stop at nothing to get our way. And so that message being sent to other nations not to get involved in this, that we are telling you that we are not going to tolerate involvement from other countries, was another message that he sent. And he talked about within our borders that U.S. security has been strengthened, that Homeland Security is working with local police agencies to make sure the Jewish communities are protected, but that every American should remain diligent. So those are the comments from the President of the United States that were sent to the world. There will be further discussions on this. I'm sure that every news show, national news show, is going to have somebody from the administration with more specific items on all of these points that were done, all of these talking points. But the message from America should be clear. And the President said it. We stand with Israel. That is the message that needs to be sent to the world. It cannot be a wavering message. It cannot be one that we want the fighting to end, that we just want peace in the region. All of that is the ultimate goal. But right now, this is about standing with Israel and its right and its obligation to defend itself and respond to the murderous attacks. He talked about some of the specifics, and that's where the president went with all of this. And so those were the statements by the president. I'm sure it'll be up online very soon in the podcast at KTAR.FM. You're going to want to keep it locked here for all of the news updates as the day goes on.